So I'm going to steal from JR, and I'm going to begin this second half, which I will argue is the solution, or at least the individual solution, is this idea of marking ourselves as we are here. Like, we go from what's the point? What's the point of life? What's the point of school? What's the point of working, 40 years and hopefully being able to retire, not being able to afford a house? What's the point of all this versus declaring I am here? I have two boys, 21 and 19, about to enter the workforce. Like, they're graduating, they're kind of getting towards the end of school. They're probably going to get a little bit more education, but they're looking at that. And the question is like, well, what do I do and how much will I make? And I'm like, is that the right question? But how are they going to afford a car? How are they going to afford a house? And that's the way they look, because everything of value is external. But the question is like, for them, is like, what will that sustain on the inside? Is where does that fill the cup on the inside? It might fill the bank account, but it's going to challenge us on the inside. So the question we have to look at, or the answer we're seeking to this meaning crisis, is going to be the I, that I am here, and that there is something to this. So we've talked about Sisyphus and him pushing the boulder up the hill, and the gods using that as a punishment. So I want to talk about another hill. So where my parents moved in about 1980 was this small town called Pontiac Township, which had evolved quickly to Rochester and become Rochester Hills. And across the street from where I grew up was a university called Oakland University. The story about, or the myth about Oakland University was the Dodge family, Michigan, it's all cars, paid for that. They gave the grant, they gave them a grant to build it. And they said, hey, you can have any sports, you just can't have football. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but they had no football team. And to this day, Oakland University has no football team. But what they did have is a ton of beautiful land. And they had this I don't know what you'd call it, a gully or something, where all these hills, amazing for sledding. In Michigan, we have this thing called snow that you sled down. Anyway, these massive hills that you could go sledding down in the winter. But in the summer, at the bottom of this was this big flat area where we could practice soccer. But also the Detroit Lions, whose home field was the Pontiac Silverdome, which was the next town over, Pontiac Township, would come and practice. So they would do their summer practice. Now, football in the 80s was big, but it isn't, the thing that it is now. Like, they have their own stadiums, they have their own practice fields and all this. So the Lions every summer before the season would come in and practice at Oakland University. So I would ride my bike across, and I would go to soccer practice. I was about 10 years old. It was the early 80s. And so I'd be out there with my Rochester Youth Soccer League team, and we'd go around and kick the balls. And then we would watch, me and my buddies, a couple of us would stay, and we would watch the Lions practice. And it's funny, sometimes they would walk off the field, and our field was between where they practiced and where the cars parked, because there was this huge road that came down, and they'd all go pile into their SUVs, their Jeeps, and their trucks, and they go tearing up the thing. And if a guy didn't make it, they'd all razz him. And I'm telling you, as a 10-year-old kid, this was the greatest thing ever, because these guys would walk by, these Jerry Ball types, these Mike Kofers. These guys were 6 foot plus, 200, 300 pounds, and they walked by, they were like gods. They were just massive human beings, and we were in awe of them. I mean, they were football players. After one practice, me and a buddy stayed, and we were watching them all practice, and then they blow the whistle, and a bunch of people will come and try to get autographs. We weren't getting autographs because we were just kids there for soccer practice. And all the guys were walking off the field, going over to their cars and whatnot. But when all the guys left, we kind of watched them and waited, because we couldn't go leave anyway, because they had to drive all their trucks off. But we're waiting. I heard a whistle blow. And on this other hill, massive hill, we saw this guy sprinting up to the top of the hill. Sprints to the top, and then he jogs down. Gets down, rests for about 60 seconds, whistle, go, boom, flies up the hill. I mean, like a rocket up the hill. Everyone else is gone. And this guy's running hills. And whatever the kid curiosity in me is like, I'm going to go check this out. So I ride my bike over a couple hundred yards away, and the coach is there, and, I don't get too close, but I kind of just bring my bike over, and I watch this guy jogging down. He's got his Lions practice jersey on. He comes down, he gets to the bottom. He puts his hands on his knees. He's just dripping with sweat, hair all poofed out and everything. I mean, he looks hit, and he's just huffing. He's huffing about 90 seconds. One more time, boom, goes, whistle blows. He rockets up the hill. I mean, I've never seen someone so fast. I mean, it was just like lightning out of a bottle out of there. Again, up and down this hill. He comes down, he sees us, and he's like, hey guys, no autographs. We're like, okay. Like, we didn't have any pencil or paper anyway. But I just couldn't believe it. Like, what is this guy doing? And then whistle again, boom, off. Like, up and down that hill. I mean, I don't know how long it was, but I can tell you this. Everybody else was gone. That was number 20. That was Billy Sims. Like, we knew it, Billy Sims. And Billy Sims was a big deal. He was our number 1 draft pick. He was the rookie of the year. He was the Heisman Trophy winner. He was an all-pro. And for a team that had pretty bare cupboards, you know, we didn't have a lot to cheer for as Lions fans, Billy Sims was a huge deal. And to see the greatest player like that I knew growing up on the Lions just doing what everybody else was gone. They're over there goofing around, playing, driving their trucks up, and this guy's still running. End of practice. It shifted something in me. I just, as a kid, I'm like, okay, this guy's doing something that nobody else is doing, and he's the best player on the team. There has to be something here. And like I always say, that's the moment when I became a Lions fan. And, you know, becoming a Lions fan is a hard thing because the Lions have been terrible. Or Billy Sims ends up busting his knee. He only makes it 5 years in the league, still holds a ton of records, I think rushing per yard and things like that. I mean, here we are 40 years later, and this guy still has records. He has his own barbecue place now, which is very good, a chain. But anyway, the Lions now have become this other story because of Dan Campbell and because of the attitude that he and Brad Holmes have brought to this. This is the front of Ford Field, this all grit. When they were on HBO a few years ago on Hard Knocks, like the back of their thing was grit, and it was a joke because the Lions have been so bad for so long. Like, who are they to say grit? We've never had back-to-back years like they've had now. But the idea is like what Billy Sims had, the rest of the team did not have. They did not have the will to be the best, but Billy Sims did, and he was the best at that time. And now, when you see the coach has that attitude, here he is with his grit hat and grit on the field and grit in the thing of like, what we're going to do is we're going to outwork everybody else. It's a different way of looking at that hill. So when we look at Sisyphus and we see going up the hill is meaningless, that's not what Billy Sims saw. He saw it as a way to get better. Like that, and that's how we can look at the meaninglessness in the pain and the suffering of life. It exists, and we think, well, why, God? Why does the pain and the suffering of life exist? Why do I have to push this boulder up this hill? Why do I have to run up this one more time? But the challenge is on us to find the meaning and purpose in that. Because if we don't see it, if we can't aim at it, we can't align to it, we're always going to make the decision that this sucks, that this is no good. And that is a choice we have. We can look at the plights of our lives and say, this is hard, I don't want to do this. Or we can Billy Sims it and say one more time. We can run up that hill and say, like, if this makes me stronger, then this is what I have to face. Because none of us is getting out of this game called life without doing very hard things all the time. And then on some days, those days are going to be way harder than others because the world is going to come and punch us in the face. It is not avoidable. Like, we're going to get hit. But the reason why we focus on grit or resilience or getting stronger or even purpose is when we do face the hard time, the question is can we get past it? Can we make it past that thing that is harder? And that's where I believe we're going to find purpose. If meaninglessness is about boredom and apathy and the inability to find meaning or purpose in a moment, then purpose must be the opposite of that. It's the alignment to what am I trying to get out of this? I said to my son the other day, this is a dadism or a parentism, whatever you want to call it. I'm like, the world is going to give you nothing. Like, he's frustrated with so many things, you know, going back to school and not having this time and having to get all this stuff done. And I'm like, the world will give you nothing, but it will offer you opportunities to take. But you've got to see them and you've got to go get them. But if all you see is hardship, all you will find is hardship. So how are you going to look at the hill? In Story, we talk about this. As a matter of fact, we point you at this. Because when we're talking about stories, why tell stories? Why is the Bible full of stories? Why do we write and publish millions of books every year and make hundreds of different movies and Netflix and the 100 million channels that we have? Like, why are we so fascinated with stories? We never stop and ask that question. But the thing is if you look at stories over time, whether they're just stories told by the campfire, like Gilgamesh, these cultural stories of old, like from Babylon, or religious stories, like the stories of Christ or the stories of the Old Testament, the stories point us to suffering. I like when people are like, oh, my God, I pray to God that he, live, laugh, love. He's going to make my world better. And I'm like, what Bible are you reading? Like, what part of the Bible is live, laugh, love? What phrase is that in? Because the truth of the Bible is every one of those stories, take the God part out of it and just take the stories. They are stories of suffering. And what does it take to overcome the suffering? It's facing it. And so it's running up the hill. It's facing the challenge that life puts in front of us, because that's the meaning that we're meant to do. Because what if the suffering is not accidental? That doesn't mean like we're being given it on purpose. But what we can do is give it meaning. And Viktor Frankl built his whole philosophy on this. He's in the concentration camps. He lost his whole family, lost his freedom, almost died, was in multiple different camps. And then in the end, like, he came out and he's like, there has to be meaning to this, because what he found is the people in camp who had a meaning and purpose to live had a greater chance of survival than those who gave up their meaning. And by the way, there's data that proves that people who have a meaning and purpose in their life will live longer than those who don't. Now, where's the science behind that? So when we look at our stories, what we're looking at is this idea of like, challenges are not the thing we're meant to avoid. Challenges are the things that we're meant to face, because those are the things that shape us. And I talked about school, so I'm going to talk to you one of the things they talked about us in school. So every few years, someone comes out with something and they'll talk about it. This one came out, it blipped. I was at one professional development for one slide. This guy mentioned this thing called the zone of proximal development. That's how we're supposed to be teaching kids. And then he moved on. And they talked about this thing called scaffolding and all this other stuff that went with it, this educational jargon. And I'm like, whoa. Go back. Now, of course, he didn't. But in my head, I saved that nugget. And it has stuck with me. It's designed by the scientist. I think his name was Vygotsky. But he was talking about, we all have this zone of proximal development. So there's our current space, our known. That's what we talked about in story. There is this place that we know. Right now, I am the Aaron that I know. Today, I could run 3.41 miles. That's what I was. Yesterday, I only did like 3.11 miles. But today, I went an extra, well, I said a half mile, but it was probably like a fourth or third of a mile, whatever it was. But anyway, the point being is like, I know. I could probably guess about how many sit-ups or push-ups I could do. 3. But anyway, the point being is we all have this zone of what we know we can do. But what Vygotsky pointed to is like, we also have this place beyond that ability, that we all have this ability to go a percentage past our own capabilities. We can work a little bit harder. We can run, right, Curtis, a little bit further. We can push ourselves a little bit harder to become better. I might not be a good cook today, but I can get a bit better if I try something new, if I challenge myself to get a bit better. Now, he says, out of that, there's a capacity that we can't do. So let's say I think I can do 10 push-ups. Well, maybe I can do 10 and a half, or maybe I could get to 11, but 50 is probably out of the question. And so the thing is we do have limits currently on this, but by going into our zone of proximal development, what we have is the ability to do is to increase our capacity. So we teach school like it's absolutes. You either know algebra or you don't. You either pass the test or you don't. But the mistake we make is we don't build the system on the very psychology that is growth mindset, which is, what if we get better? Because we give like, oh, you got an A, you got a B, you got a C, and then we move on to the next topic instead of like training people to grow. So we haven't taught this next generation. We haven't taught our generations to grow. But the psychology says that is how the human brain is wired, is through growth, through growing by always pushing ourselves one step beyond what we know that we can do. It doesn't mean in the zone that we can't do it. It just means it's beyond what we know we can do. And so we're trying to get better and better a bit by bit. Now, more recent psychology in businesses and things co-opt that by talking about like our ability to aim our purpose into that space. That when we're in that space of proximal development, we feel meaning and purpose. When we push ourselves to do something more, We find more in ourselves and we feel the dopamine, but we also feel a sense of meaning and purpose that I can do this. I can be better at this. Like I am here and I have value. JR, look at his story. Like if you, like in the previous piece, what we talked about is JR went from writing his name to taking pictures. Those pictures became of his friends, which became news, which became an idea, which then spread to Brazil and Africa and in the inner city of Paris. And he started having an impact because of something he experienced. It became a solution to his meaning crisis. He brought purpose to his pain. So to prove that statement, that there is purpose in pain, we look at this. The American Psychological Association highlights that having a purpose is significantly linked to lower levels of anxiety, of depression and anxiety. When they studied this in kids, there's data to say it cuts it in half. That people who find meaning and purpose, that 50% of them lose their anxiety and their depression, and that the others show a significant decrease in their anxiety and depression. We have a depression epidemic in the United States. It is the number one reason for missed work. It is amongst the top reasons for prescription medications is depression and anxiety. And what we're seeing is meaning and purpose seem to solve the problem of lacking meaning and purpose. The Journal of American Medical Association studied 7,000 adults over the age of 50. There's the other one I argued about. That people who have a strong sense of purpose are less likely to die in 4 years. You live longer on purpose. Johns Hopkins, meaning and purpose leads to deeper, more sustainable well-being, which seems logical, but I really like this. Beyond fleeting happiness, which is something I talk about all the time. Happiness is an illusion. Purpose is real. It fosters resilience, fulfillment, and direction. Think about those three things. Those are three very separate things. Resilience is inner strength and fortitude. It's your ability to walk into the zone of proximal development. Fulfillment means that when I do that, I get something back. That when I give to the thing, I get something back. And then the last thing is direction. Well, what is purpose if not the point? Right? A story without purpose has no point. So when we ask what is the point, what it means is what is the direction? Because that's what a point is. It means we point at something. Research indicates, like they study this in business and employees. And I saw all of these things and I lumped them in there in one. Increased profits for business, productivity, income, fewer absences, job turnover, and well-being. This is if their employees have a high sense of purpose in the work that they're doing, everybody benefits. All boats rise. I saw one piece of data that says an individual who works in a job where they feel purpose makes $12,000 more on average than somebody else. That's a pretty impressive stat. So this idea of change is like the lack of meaning is the seeking of this. And when we look at the data on the other side of this, it says it solves the problems that the lack of meaning is creating. Oops. So this is a more modern look at this. So I thought like, well, I can tell you stories, but this is the place where I'm going to go from purpose as a narrative to the data. So there's something called the 1% rule. This is talked about often in business and things like this, but it's also in habits and in how we can grow. But this is an interesting piece of data. And I found myself talking to my son about this when he was going back to school the other day. So if we take you today as a baseline, that's you, and we score you number one. Your starting value is 1. So my known capacity today, let's say to work out, or my capacity to cook, or my capacity to do business is 1. That's what I am today. And every day I just put 1% more in. And we get that hokey, like, yeah, just give 1% more. We hear stuff like this. I've heard it my whole life. But when you look at the math of it, it's actually pretty crazy. That if I focus my purpose on getting better at something, like some part of my work or being a parent, because none of us are perfect at that, being a friend, being a coworker, like building a business, whatever it is, like if we put it in, like look at the math. It's actually pretty obvious. If we increase it by 1%, which is 0.01, that's not a lot. I just get a little bit better today. 1 times 0.01 is 1. We see the 1% increase. Here's the best part. After 2 days, we see a 2% increase. After 3 days, we see a 3% increase. And you're like, okay, well, that makes sense because you're adding 1% every day. But it compounds. What you don't see down the decimal points is behind that is you're actually getting a little bit more each time. It's 1% on that 1%, which in the beginning doesn't seem like much. But after 365 days, you're not 100% or you're not 3% better, because that's what that would be. you're 37.78% better. Like you're increasing exponentially. So the little bit that you're getting better today, oh, I'm not getting any gains at the gym. But if you do the same thing, if you keep on doing the same thing every day, what you do is you see the gains begin to compound. They get better and better. So like today, I'll give an example because, Curtis and running. Today I ran a half a mile further. But here's what also happened. My heart rate has dropped by about 15 beats. So I used to be upwards of around 170. Today I was in the mid to low 150s. So like my circulation system is getting better. My lungs are getting better. My legs are getting stronger. Each of those things are market increases, but as 1% increases, all of those things are compounding. So I'm not just getting my legs stronger. All the different parts are working together and getting stronger together. And so what's happening is I'm starting, here I am at day whatever, 15 or whatever, but I'm starting to get some compounding growth out of this. Anything we do aims at that level. And so we can multiply that effect over long term, but we've got to be focused on purpose. We've got to run up the hill. We got to know what we're aiming at. Here's the thing I added to this, which was, let's go back to the negative real quick. Because the things that we don't invest in don't get better. And now, again, that seems very logical, but you need to really seriously think about this. Because if we look at today and say it's meaningless, what it means is we're not trying to get better. And like anything, the law of entropy says that no matter what, nothing stays static. It's either going to get better or it's going to get worse. So we put energy in to make something better, or we put no energy in, and no matter what we do, it's going to get worse. Right? Leave milk out. It ain't going to stay milk. It's going to become like curdled. It's going to become some cheese or something. But the point being is everything will tend towards decay unless we put energy in. And so, like, again, we see that percentage drop, that 0.01 drop, that 0.01 drop. But in the end, it drops to almost zero, 0.02. That's almost zero. We go from being just us to decaying to the point where, like, there's almost nothing left. Now, hopefully we don't get to that point. But what I will argue is this, that, yeah, the world, whether that's education or politics or work, can make us feel meaningless, make us feel a lack of purpose. But the question is what are we bringing to this? Viktor Frankl said that meaning isn't something that the world gives us. It's something that the world has that we must go out and seek. So that's why he wrote his book, Man's Search for Meaning, not the world's meaning. Like I said to my son, the world isn't going to give this to us. It's up for us to go and get it, but that's hard. Yep, it's hard. It's hard to go out there and do 1% more. Well, this isn't getting better. But here's the funny thing about things not getting better in our world. The question is what are we doing every day to make it better? And if our first response to that is well, my boss or my partner or they or this or the Democrats, or the thing is you've just given that percentage to somebody else. And how in the world is somebody else going to make you 1% better? They can't. They can only give you the choice to do it. So any change that you've made in your life, you've made it. You've done the work. Other people might have opened the door for that opportunity, but you did the work. All my work in treatment, all my work in education, I never changed anyone's life. But what I did is give them a choice for them to change it themselves, because that's an individual choice. On that football team in the early 80s, only Billy Sims was running up that hill. He wanted to be the best. And the other 60 or 50 players that walked out the field, apparently they didn't want to be the best. They wanted to be able to show up and hopefully be the best. He was the one working at it. And the thing is like, that's our life. We can push the rock up the hill like Sisyphus and go, what's the point? Or we can push it and be like, that's my workout. I'm going to go down and push it again. And maybe when we get to the top of the hill and that boulder rolls down, we get that opportunity to look out at the horizon and look at the world and just take that minute and say, like, this is why I push it up the hill. Because I did all this work so I could see the horizon. Every day, it's our choice to make the burdens that we carry meaningful or meaningless. And the difference is growth or decay. Growth or decay. And the problem we have in the world is like, we're seeing this epidemic because we've lost our stories. We've lost our ability to see that the challenges are meant for our own personal growth. We've standardized the test. We've standardized the education. We've created this merit work system that's like, hey, just give us this and we'll make billions and we'll pay you, a lump sum, a little bit, like, and we get frustrated with the system, but we've never thought, what do I need to do to make this better? Not only better for ourselves, but the challenge is to make it better. Because when Billy was running up that hill, I saw that he was there. And I bet his teammates knew he was there. They just chose not to see it. They chose to walk off. This is a picture of the Story of Self website. And this is why it exists. Because it's up to us to see what we see when we climb the hill. Is climbing the hill a punishment? Or is it the potential for us to get to the next level and see what's beyond? That's up to us to decide. Only we can make our choice for that. And for me, the choices for that, what I want to make the choice every day is like, how do I make myself better? How do I get better with my time? How do I get better in my relationships? How do I have a better impact? How can I tell a better story? And the key is just, how do I just get a little bit better? And there are days when I don't want to do anything. I just want to veg. I just want McDonald's and to watch or do nothing. But then I get frustrated because I know where that's leading me. If I spend too much time in that space, it's going to eat me alive. And our time is finite. It's our one currency that we all have. So we should invest it on the better. But when I'm looking at this now, it's about understanding that we've created a world where kids are graduating school and this is how they feel. But if each of us can add a little bit to our own lives, then the story coming after us can be better. Because they look like this because their parents look like that. And their parents look like that because their friends look like that. And their friends and your parents look like that because that's what their jobs are making them feel like. Because they're watching news and that's what the news makes them feel like. And they're watching politics because that's what politics makes them feel like. But it's up to us to decide whether we run up the hill or not. That's up to us. The good, the bad in my life, some of that is going to fall on my lap. But I think if I can be on this path, if I can have enough grit and I can have enough purpose, then what happens is, like the Surgeon General says, then the fulfillment, the resilience, and the purpose can come with that. And the science says the same thing. We've got to invest in getting a 1% better. Stop waiting for the world to get better. Stop waiting for the world to change. It's not going to happen unless we choose it ourselves. That's what purpose means. What am I trying to make better in my life and for those around me? And what am I doing to try to make the world better for those who are coming after me? That's it. That's the story we leave behind. I have this deep fear that we've lost our stories. And by losing our stories, or by having so many stories, we don't know which ones are the real ones. We don't know which ones are ours. That our pain keeps on manifesting and we're just looking for an escape from it. That's where I see the data getting worse and worse. So we push back. We push back one person at a time, take our story back, and challenge others to change their story too. I know you've seen it in your own life. Now the challenge is to begin to call others to it in their lives. Because purpose can multiply. Just like apathy and meaninglessness can multiply, we see it spreading all across the world. We see the epidemic across the world of a lack of meaning. It's a global issue. Or what we do is we start investing. We start running up the hill and being like, this is what I can do today. If I'm the only one on the team running up the hill, and I know I'm not, then that's enough. And so when I don't feel like running and I see Curtis running, then I run. Because that's what I thought today. It was about the storm, and I'm like, Curtis probably ran today. I'm going to go run. That's what we do. Pass purpose on. Get on purpose, run on the hill, and remember, if a lack of meaning exists on this planet, the place of meaning also exists. And that's our story. So get to it. Anyway, thanks for being here. Talk to you guys soon. Hope you're all doing well. Love you bunches. And as I always like to say, get the frig out. I don't know if the PG-13, otherwise I'd say. All right, everyone. Have a good one.